Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined from San Francisco, California, by Izabel Loinaz, Associate Client Partner, ESG and Sustainability Solutions of Korn Ferry. Korn Ferry is a management consulting firm ranked in the top 2% on SustainAlytics ESG Risk Rating in 2021 and the Carbon Disclosure Project's highest leadership rating in 2022. As of 2021, 70% of their buildings are certified by Green Building Standards, up 19% from 2020. Korn Ferry is also recognized as a leading workplace for parents, women, veterans, and LGBTQ individuals. Izabel joined Korn Ferry in 2021 and brings with her more than 20 years of catalyzing innovation and resilience across entrepreneurial, corporate, and public institutions. Izabel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, CB. It's really nice to meet you.
Of course. Izabel, tell us a little bit about your professional purpose and how, if at all, if that has changed during your career.
So I'm very service oriented. Have always been oriented that way. I think that comes from a long history, a long line of service oriented family, and impact and the benefit of individuals and society has always been my aim. I've at every stage, I have asked myself and assessed for my own personal knowledge and understanding, what have I learned at this point in my career, and what are the skills that I have, and how do I apply that for maximum impact and maximum scale at the maximum urgency possible. When I came to Korn Ferry, it really was, I was at this junction where I understood that really for us to accelerate climate action, accelerate social innovation and social benefit, that it really was coming down to people, mindset, and leadership. And so I was very clear that I wanted to be in a place where I could accelerate that and amplify that, and you know, the urgency is really quite sobering, and so that's generally my guide as I go through my career.
Fascinating to hear, and very timely too. I would say, because this spring we are talking with our member companies about the customer sustainability interface. Now, how is Korn Ferry working with their customers to create value with sustainability initiatives? And what have you heard from customers on their sustainability needs?
We're finding that there is this sense of urgency, even though we've had a really good evolution of what sustainability looks like, how to define it, how to clarify and implement and accelerate it. There's still a lot of uncertainty. And we're finding that what we're hearing from our clients, hearing from companies, is the need to amplify what they have already done. Most of them have already defined what that interface looks like, defined what is authentic to them. But a lot of the organizations that we work with are finding that the ability to amplify it, the ability to scale, and really to get that acceleration that they need, they're bumping up against a lot of roadblocks or speed bumps that are making it really difficult. So a lot of the work that we do is in identifying what those roadblocks are to scaling and amplifying, and really rolling up our sleeves and digging in and trying to alleviate those and reduce those speed bumps. And most of the time it has to do with their structures or their talent, having the right capabilities in the right roles, organized and synchronized, right, to be pointing in the same direction. So many times different departments are pointing in so many different directions, rightfully so, because a lot of organizations have built their programs very grassroots. So it's helping then kind of solidify and clarify and point it all in one direction.
Yeah, that's so critical, isn't it, to get everybody to row in that same direction. And I've as well observed in many, many companies that that there is no North Star, and oftentimes I think that stems from a lack of purpose.
Absolutely.
So you yourself are certified by the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI as we call it. How does this shape your approach to your work at Korn Ferry, and how you work with your clients, on their ESG goals?
When I was in graduate school, so I got my MBA at Presidio Graduate School. So for those who are not familiar with the program, it was the first sustainable MBA. Back then, it was a lot of reporting. That was a lot of what was taught in sustainable business programs. And so GRI was the one, right, to make sure that you were educated in. Since then, obviously, a lot more frameworks. It became a very saturated market in terms of different frameworks for different purposes, for different industries. And now we're seeing a more consolidation of those frameworks and certifying bodies, right? How that plays out in the work that I do now is really about the discipline of finding what is material, prioritization, and then clarity. So really what we're trying to find is an organizing structure and helping our companies, our clients, get that clarity. Frameworks in general, conceptually, are the backbone of what we do in order to have that clarity and organization. And thankfully, things are starting to move, more to a more global standard of how we identify those material issues, how we do that prioritization, what are kind of the North Stars for pretty much everyone, right? What are the things that just globally we want to make sure that we cover? So while GRI is not the only solution, it is still a heavy player, and almost every organization uses GRI at least as an organizing framework, even if they don't go through the full third-party certification process.
Yeah, that's really interesting as to how it shapes your thinking in terms of kind of purpose, materiality, and just focusing on what's important. Now, alongside that, you have a really interesting background because you also, have training in behavioral psychology and social innovation. How do you use these kinds of skills in helping clients, strengthen and retain thriving workforce systems during what some are calling the Great Reshuffle?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because there's almost like this dual mind that a lot of professional sustainability professionals have to navigate, right? So there's the discipline and structure of metrics, reporting, frameworks, disclosures, science-based targets that are, it's a very structured environment that you need to be working with. And then you have the people who are operating that, the people who are making decisions around that, the people who are implementing strategies and tactics and trying to actually achieve these goals. You really have to understand how people operate. Really have to understand what motivates people. You have to understand how people organize themselves around change and what are those stress points and how do you alleviate those stress points and incentivize on a behavioral level. So we can have our structural maturity as we go along, but we also have to have our behavioral maturity that we're trying to support and move forward. So human-centered design really does come into play here. And then we have a rising workforce where purpose and work need to be so much closer knit. And so we have a rising workforce that understands climate change, really, really understands it intimately and scientifically in a way that no generation prior has had kind of uniformly. so much more awareness around social injustice and that connection between their their small p purpose in terms of what do they do every day in their work and their job, and their big P purpose of like, who am I as a person? Who do I want to be in society? That is so much more entwined. And so you have also an environment, a cultural environment, where you really do need to engage your workforce in the greater purpose of the organization and that North Star. And they need to feel like they are connected to that their role is aligned and pointed in that direction, and it's in a direction that aligns with their values. So that's a very different organizational structure that you need to support and build. So it's not only just about achieving goals as an organization, it's also about retaining your talent and optimizing your talent towards that. So marrying those two together is somewhat of a new phenomenon, right? And a new need. And the pain point is so much higher now in terms of making those connections and really truly putting your attention and your efforts in that direction.
Yeah, truly. I mean, one has to use both the left side and the right side of the brain, if I may, put it that way.
That's a great way to put it.
to kind of get all of this complicated ESG measurement and disclosure, and then on the other end, kind of keeping and attracting talent. That's great. So that leads to brings another question to mind. I mean, we recently spoke to Andrew Winston, who co-authored the book Net Positive with Paul Pullman. And Andrew highlighted the importance of staffing up for climate resilience, the same way a business would for any other challenge. I mean, have you seen clients using strategies in their efforts to create a climate resilient future that they are also kind of, staffing up like they would with any other challenge?
For the organizations who've really clarified the need and understand that they've evolved now and matured to the point where they're not just a small department to now a much more distributed competency around ESG and sustainability, it is becoming more and more distributed. So the evolution is in that direction. So that requires a level of understanding, competency, demonstrated competency, and some experience with sustainability and ESG. That is a little bit harder to find right now. So we have definitely a battle for talent who has experience in this space. So we have the value of the sustainability professional is rising very quickly in terms of in the market. And then you have this rising workforce I referred to earlier, who has already made the personal connection between climate change and their purpose at work. So now those organizations are looking to assessing their staff and their employees for those capabilities and those qualities that can be trained up or skilled up. So this has become also a retention strategy as well. So we're seeing trainings across the board for level setting. We're seeing a lot more of that level setting of what does ESG and sustainability mean to the organization, what's the context globally, and then how does that connect to their role specifically, and what are the strategies they will be supporting. So we're seeing more and more of that demand, and the other thing that we're seeing, so that's organizationally. We're also seeing, for example, at the individual level, huge migrations from tech, this big wave of tech layoffs right now, a huge migration of tech workers now aiming their skills to climate tech. So we're also seeing huge migrations of skill sets and pointing them in the direction of climate solutions or social innovation solutions.
Yeah, in fact, the New York Times, I think, ran an article to that effect of this migration from tech to climate, which I guess is good for all of us looking at the future. And also, I think we are doing a good thing here at the University of Pittsburgh in our programs, in the MBA and the graduate level, what we are trying to create what we call a sustainability generalist, so that someone who can get into an organization and hit the ground running with regard to sustainability tasks. I mean, it doesn't have to be an expert or have a deep dive in sustainability, but should be able to kind of play their part and not be a bystander. So that's what we are trying to do.
Well, that's a great thing that you identify, because there are definitely different strata when we talk about talent, when we talk about staffing up for climate resilience. There's the strata of the generalist, right? Which is, there are certain mindsets and skill sets that are more geared towards recognizing opportunities, and then how do you take action on those opportunities, and mindsets of thinking in much more of a systematic way or a part of a system. And then there's this whole other level that's around the technical knowledge, right? So you have that T-shaped leader, and then you have the deep, technical knowledge. And we're finding that there more and more, the technical roles are needing to broaden their T a bit more, but their ability to still see themselves part of a fuller system in a business context. So we will have sometimes the reverse issue where the technical roles need to be skilled up in business knowledge and understanding and strategy and mindsets, right?
Yep. It is indeed a balancing act.
Yes.
A fascinating conversation, but we're coming to the close of our time. So what call to action would you make to our listeners?
So my call to the listeners is to take a moment, a little self-reflection of really assessing what are the skills that you have now, what is the knowledge, what is the wisdom that you have now, and are you really optimizing that impact and scale and urgency? And if not, what would it take? What could you do to amplify that?
Very well put. Izabel, thank you for taking some of your valuable time and spending it with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
And this is your host, CB Bhattacharya, saying goodbye and reminding you as well that on March 9th at 3 p.m., we will be virtually convening with the Middle America Network to discuss how to further sustainable development in the region. Registration details are in the show notes, and we hope to see you there, and also hope to see you back for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. And before I sign off, I do want to say this podcast is made possible with the help of my colleagues Chris Gassman, Senior Associate Director at the Center for Sustainable Business, and Kristen P. Ahern, Center Program Manager. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, and I hope to see you again in a few weeks for another edition of Sustaining Sustainability.